On machines equipped with bar tabulators, indent by stroking the tabulator bar with the first finger of your right hand. On the electromatic, the tabulator key is on the left. It is only necessary to touch the tabulator key. You need not hold it down until the carriage stops. The carriage return lever is usually at the left. This lever returns the carriage and at the same time operates the line space mechanism so that the paper is set for a new line. On manually operated machines, learn to return the carriage with a quick circular movement of your left hand, avoiding unnecessary effort and lost motion. Learn to judge how hard to hit the carriage return lever so that the carriage returns the whole way without banging against the margin stop. That was not hard enough. That was too hard. That was better. Your hand should drop from the lever when it is about in line with the left frame of the machine and should be back on the keys when the carriage reaches the right stop. Now watch this in slow motion. For additional line spaces, after the carriage has returned, slack the carriage return lever as often as required. On the electromatic machine, the carriage is returned by touching this key with the little finger of your right hand. The burrows works in the same manner. As the carriage returns, the paper is automatically advanced for the next line. If additional line spaces are required on the burrows or the electromatic, touch the carriage return key lightly, as many times as necessary. Now let's see about paper insertion. This is the paper table. This is the paper guide. This is the paper bale. And this is the platen. The paper guide can be moved to any point on the paper table. Its position in relation to the carriage or line scale is determined from this scale on the paper table. L.C. Smith, Remington, Underwood, and Woodstock machines have similar scales. The paper tables on the electromatic and Burroughs machines do not have line scales. Therefore, the position of the paper guide is determined by inspection. The paper rests against the paper table and the paper guide as it is fed into the machine. The paper bale holds the paper close to the platen. This prevents paper drumming, keeps the paper from flapping, and makes your type impression sharp and even. These rubber rolls should divide your sheet in even thirds. Otherwise, this may happen if you turn your paper back. The paper feed rolls are out of sight under the platen. These rolls and the platen feed paper into the machine and hold the paper in position. To insert paper rapidly, Arrange it so it can be handled easily. Pick up the sheets with your left hand, fingers above and your thumb below, near the middle of the left edge of the sheet. Place the sheets on the paper table, with the left edge against the paper guide, and the top edge firmly touching the feed roll. With your right hand, give the platen knob a rapid twirl, and turn the sheets to the writing line. As you let go of the platen knob, bring your right hand forward, and with your right thumb, move the paper bale in place, so that the paper is held firmly under the paper bale. You can do this in 5 counts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now watch the counts and motions blend into one continuous action. Let's try it on a machine with a different kind of paper bale. When you use a carbon pack, be sure to use smooth carbon and insert the pack squarely in the machine. If you don't, this may happen. This means wasted paper and lost time. Improper feeding also means crooked paper. When this happens, use the paper release lever, which releases the pressure on the feed rolls and permits the paper to be adjusted. Line up your paper with the paper guide. Then turn the paper down and check it with the alignment scale. The paper release lever is always back of and inside the platen knob and projects upward like this. The electromatic, however, has the release lever at the left. Be sure to use the paper release lever when you take out letters or copy. This is not advisable. It bothers other people, wears the line space ratchet and gears, causes carbon paper smears, and rubs the paper sizing into the platen, making it glossy and causing paper slippage later. The carriage can be moved to the right or left by holding the platen knob with your fingers and pressing the carriage release lever with your thumb. Machines have 2 carriage release levers, one at the right and one at the left. When you understand the basic technique, the next most important thing is intelligent and purposeful practice.
The typewriter has greatly influenced the business, commercial, and economic progress of the nation. Today, typewriters enable women and girls to perform military and industrial services as important as those performed by men. Through the courtesy of the Smithsonian Institution, we show the development of the typewriter, starting with the Burt typographer of 1829. Next, the Shoals machine of 1868. The Remington of 1873. This is the Calligraph, made in 1883. Next, the Hammond typewriter, made in 1884. About 1900, the Smith Premier appeared, followed by the Blickendorfer in the same year. This is the first portable, a Corona, and this is the Bennett pocket typewriter. In addition to these standard machines now in use, modern business has created needs for special typewriters, such as wide carriage machines, justifying typewriters with which to make straight right margins, book type adjusted spacing machines which turn out copy like this, special forms writers, calculating machine typewriters, and card punch typewriters which turn out cards like this. Today, millions of typists at their machines speed the business and war activity of our nation. Their task is complicated by a typewriter shortage and a shortage of experienced personnel. Unfortunately, many typists cannot work rapidly and accurately. To turn out more and better work on the office front, beginners and average stenographers and typists must acquire superior usable typing skill. This film will demonstrate and explain the techniques essential for superior typing. One way to learn a better or the best way of doing anything is to watch and analyze the skill of an expert. If your skills are patterned after those of an expert, you can be a superior typist. Miss Lenore Fenton, who won 11 international awards and set 8 international records in typing and machine transcription, will show us the typewriting skill which enabled her to set these records.
In order to become an expert typist, it is essential to master the correct typing technique. How you type is more important than what you type. If you master the correct method of typing, your typing will continue to improve. But if you learn to type perfect copies slowly with one finger, you will continue to be a one-finger typist. If you want to become an expert typist, learn to work like one. You should know how to operate all makes of typewriters. Let's look at the various machines. This is the Remington Noiseless. The Burroughs. The Royal. The Underwood. The Woodstock. The L.C. Smith.
All right. Hello. Oh, we have. Yeah, I would love for somebody in the chat to confirm they can hear us. It's always a good first step, I think. If you can hear me or Glenn, or ideally both, we do. Thank you so much. Yeah. Wait, Glenn, I'm gonna interrupt you. Can I interrupt you? Is that okay? Well, I'm showing the secret Kickstarter UI, but check out, we just hit 5x, 500% just now. Annabelle is not hearing. Oh, okay, that's really good to know. give me just a second. So, sorry. Thank you so much. Let me just, for those of you who you don't see my screen, but it's just basically just an incredible number of open windows and faces and stuff like this. So, not hearing Glenn. Please, Glenn, could you like keep making noises maybe once in a while so I could. Okay. Okay. Give me just a second. Okay. So, sorry everybody. It's yeah. We tested it. Unfortunately, there's this strange set of disconnection between kind of hearing us locally, hearing us externally. I'm trying to orient ourselves. Glenn is saying, because I can hear Glenn, that's the strange thing. Glenn is saying he's showing his, oh yeah, so Glenn, please, maybe Glenn, you can entertain the crowd in a chat while I'm trying to figure out, because I really don't know what's going on, because this just worked before. I need to look at my notes. Thank you everybody for bearing with us. Sorry, everybody. Yeah. So I just muted myself because I wanted to check in with Glenn about something. Yes. We are having trouble with audio, which, was bound to happen at some point. And so I can hear Glenn locally, but it's not going to be fun for anybody if I just repeat what Glenn says in his voice. It will be fun for 2 minutes, but maybe not for more. So now I'm just trying to figure out how to pipe Glenn into everybody's heads, and unfortunately the interface is really cumbersome. It's OBS, it's something called black hole, which maybe is foreshadowing, as they say. Here we go. Input, output. Glenn, can you talk now? No. No. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, everybody. Okay, can you speak now?
Yes, I am allowed to speak. I can speak.
Here's what I think is happening. I think people can hear you now, and I would love somebody in chat to confirm that you can hear Glenn. Unfortunately, No, it's not a success. I
Hooray!
cannot hear Glenn.
Oh, you can't hear me.
So
You've got a chain
that's
issue.
the first step. This is a comedy of hilarity.
Well, here, I'll talk to the
I
crowd.
will
Well, I'll do
keep
the crowd work.
pressing
Hey,
things.
everybody, welcome to
I
this
think we can
event.
make it
And
happen.
we're in the last 30 minutes of the
no.
Martina's. No, I can hear Martine. He can't hear me. You can hear me.
This is so funny.
We're in the last
We'll
30
get it
minutes of the
right.
wrap up for Shift Happens, a project 7 years in the making. And Martine has done a bang up job. Both. You can hear us both.
That was weird.
Oh,
right?
no, but you can't.
Did I just make
sorry.
it weird?
Martine can't hear me, but you can hear. So I'll just keep going. So Martine is the author.
I think
Martine Wishari is the author of this book. You can't hear me.
This is so funny. Why cannot I hear Glenn? And I think I know what the answer is. So we're gonna try to be. Oh, you heard that effect. Okay, I'm so sorry. This is so funny.
What's that?
Glenn, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go old school. I'm gonna put on AirPods. You're gonna call me. That's how I'm gonna hear you. We just. Do you think that's gonna work?
How am I gonna call you?
You're actually speaking. I cannot hear you now. This is amazing. We tested it. That's so funny.
Feed some of the sound back.
I'm texting Glenn right now. Oh, okay. Glenn says my idea is not great. Speakerphone. Okay, let me see.
I don't know what's going on. Well, anyway, we're almost at.
Let's try this.
So I'm going to keep.
Okay.
Martine can't hear me, and he's going to keep talking, but I'm going to talk over him. We crossed $750,000. That's the big news today.
Okay. Can people still hear Glenn? Glenn, can you say something identifiable, please?
I am still talking identifiably.
Okay. Glenn said I am still talking. So I think maybe we figured it out.
All right,
yes.
Can everybody hear us?
All right.
And Martine can hear me.
Yes.
You can hear me. All right.
Okay.
Okay. Hey, let's start. Let's do the. Hey, folks! Thanks for tuning in to this live troubleshooting stream. We all know the internet is terrible and should be eliminated immediately, and this is proof of. We just lost $750,000 on the campaign, and the man himself is here. Martine Wishari is the creator of Shift Happens, and we have questions, things people asking questions. We have answers, but congratulations. Amazing work. Here we go.
Thank you. I mean, is this a congratulations from me, for us, I think for everybody, right?
That's congratulations to you.
Yeah.
I think it's I mean, it's I'm Glenn Fleishman. I'm the project manager on this and the editor of the book. I browbeat Martine into hiring me years ago to work on it. I convinced him that I would somehow have ideas that would help him, and I guess it worked. It all worked.
Yeah. Yeah. No. I guess, as they say, no regrets. This is
success.
Yeah.
So, folks, we just decided to do this thing as a kind of like we're counting down to the end. It's kind of fun to just watch things tick over at the last minute, and it's Kickstarter is a participatory event, right? Everybody is involved in it because it's the unseen hand of the market at work, but it's also, of course, every individual person who's interested in making this thing happen. So, thank you for being part of this. So we're just doing this. It's a little silly to do a thing, but we figure people may have questions, and Martine has a million answers, and we'll just go for it. So if ask questions in the chat, we're following along. We already had questions earlier, which were unless anything else you want to say generally before we start asking questions or talking about other things.
Not really. I mean, I'm just glad for everybody who's here. I see the chat. Thanks again for bearing with us. And yeah, we don't really have a plan. Like, we just wanted to chat. We tried to keep it very casual. So
yeah, celebrate with people. So Dan Rubin would love to know favorite manual typewriters and favorite typeface from a manual typewriter.
Oh, wow, that's a good question. Favorite manual typewriter. I mean, And oh yeah, see, I wanted to go electric because those are really fun, but that's not allowed. I think, I mean, I'm gonna say like favorite in my life and sort of like what's meaningful for me, the Turkish typewriter still. It's a cheap Olympia Deluxe. It's like actually, you know, it's like from the 70s. It's not very good, but it's the one that I think started this journey for me. It just ended up being the one I started researching. So in a way, and you know, if you we wanted to show it at some point too. I built this sort of typewriter simulator that maybe some of you have seen. I'm going to show it very briefly. This is sort of the thing that, oh, you see all my secret tabs too. That's great. This is this typewriter. So the photos I took from this Turkish typewriter, which doesn't actually type in Turkish here, is actually that one because I just wanted to recognize it. So that's maybe the answer.
And that's the Gorton typeface above it too, right? The type that says shift happens on that page is the Gorton.
Yeah, that's sort of, yeah. And to answer the other question, which is like the favorite typeface from a typewriter, right? Was that the question? I think there were like a lot.
Typewriter typeface.
Yeah, I think I like a lot of the Olivetti stuff, especially that like strange kind of futuristic Olivetti that was happening. I wish I could show it easily. I actually have, in my book, I have a kind of a sampling of typefaces throughout the ages from, you know, the very early, like really janky kind of fluffy looking stuff that, you know, the kind of classic typewriter typeface to all this sharp stuff towards the end that actually feels very computery, right? Very, very refined. So I forgot what are the names. There's this one person who actually wrote a paper about all these Olivetti typefaces that I could share later on Twitter. But so that's my answer. I like this sort of like 60s, 70s futuristic stuff, just because maybe you don't associate it with a typewriter. You would never thought of typewriter being that way. Yeah.
Maeve in the chat notes that they donated their last Selectric 2 to a museum 20 years ago. I always think that's a sad thing. I have all this technology I've gotten rid of as well, Maeve, and I sort of despair that I did it. I feel like, oh, if I'd kept my, I don't know, my Commodore 64, for those who are classics, OSI C1P from 1979 or 80, maybe I'd be sitting there staring at it prettily now. But I'm a technology recycler as well, so. The Selectric is in good hands, I hope. Marcin, that was an interesting part of the story when I was editing the book, and there's the chapter in which you rented which Selectric version? It was the Selectric 2, was the auto correcting,
the correcting Selectric 2,
and
yeah.
it was the correcting Selectric 10 times fast, and that was a great moment for you because you hadn't had your hands on that before, right? And then you brought one home.
Yeah, I think, you know, there was this interesting interrogation for me because, you know, you hear people have opinions about keyboards, which is great. And a lot of those opinions are like, this keyboard was the best keyboard ever made, right? And you hear it about Model M, you hear it maybe about Apple Extended, you hear it about the Selectric. And sometimes they're just nostalgia, you know, just like, yeah, you learn to type on this and it's fine. That's like a nice thing. But also the Selectric is actually really good. There's so many people who said like, I just keep dreaming about the Selectric, and I used it, and I was like, oh damn, it is something that you could dream of. Like it is a really good feeling. Yeah.
So Kim Slauson asks in the chat here, how many typewriters do you own, and what is your favorite? So we already got the favorite manual discussion, but of all, because I know, you know, this is the thing, you're not necessarily a typewriter collector. There are people out there with we sent out, we had this preview booklet that we printed up and we sent out as part of our sort of marketing and outreach into you know, friends of the project. And one person got it, and he immediately Instagram chatted me like, oh my God. And what he did is send me pictures of Olivetti's scattered around his office, you know? So some people are secret collectors, some are more public. How many do you personally own?
I think probably between 5 and 10. you
stuck in
know,
storage right now. That's part of the issue, right? Or,
yeah, I moved a few months ago, so not a lot of stuff is actually with me. The interesting thing is that at this point I have a collection of things, but that collection is very strange because in some way it's not about like getting the best keyboards and appreciating them and having this personal connection, which I think is a lot why people collect. A lot of it is just like, oh, this keyboard had like this really, you know, it was for $10 on eBay, this broken typewriter, but it had this key that I wanted to have a photo of. And so it's sort of this strange collection that some of it is just like very janky stuff that you know, that I wanted to give them a lease of life, you know, maybe a little bit. But so you know, I have this Turkish typewriter. I have this Dvorak typewriter that means a lot to me because it was actually donated by a friend of a friend, and she said her father bought that typewriter for her when she was young, and it was in Dvorak because her father wanted her to learn how to type because that's just like a useful skill in life, but he didn't want her to just be stuck being a secretary. Hence Dvorak, because you don't see a lot of Dvorak keyboards in offices, which, you know, so there was like a story attached to it.
Yeah.
She did not become a secretary, but, you know, she had this great attachment to this Royal typewriter. And I have a whole chapter about Royal typewriters because they're kind of interesting. So also waving to, I see the chat also, by the way, so like thanks for all these questions, waving to people who say hello. And, you know, and I also have, even, can I just show something random? Just came in the mail yesterday.
Yeah.
I think that's okay.
Yeah, I'll tell you. Just in the meantime, my dad is in the chat there, Charlie Fleischman, and my dad is a great. I'm gonna make him embarrassed because he's a great inspiration to me throughout my life. But also, he's the reason. My dad told me when I was, I don't know, 10 or 11. Dad, you said I think typing is going to be important for the future, something like that, probably less pretentious sounding. And I was like, oh, I should teach myself to type. So I taught myself to type at age, I don't know, 11 on a manual we had. Later we had an electric, and I think it's worked out okay. 45 years later that I learned to type then. So my dad, a man of foresight.
Yeah. So I just wanted to show, oh wow, so many questions. We should also update the Kickstarter site. There's an action item we need to do. But
yeah, we have, so yeah. I can vamp whenever you want to do that, but yeah, we're at 751, and this is like the reverse telethon. Like we already are, you know, we already the goal met many times over. But
no, I meant that we also have to like update the website itself. Should we just do this now?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Martin's gonna live. He's gonna put, because Kickstarter. Actually, I can start in another question if you don't mind while you're doing that.
We should tell people.
Someone asked. Let me.
Yeah, but basically, here's what's happening. I'm learning more about Kickstarter than Glenn because Glenn has done this before. But basically, there's this moment in time in 15 minutes, if I remember correctly, where the Kickstarter campaign gets frozen in time and you can never change it again with the exception of the top header. So we just gonna push this change live in front of everybody. So basically just adding this top saying the campaign is over. If you read it in the future, you know, there's this link. So we couldn't have done it too early because then it's really confusing when you still want to back it.
Yeah, people come, they're like, wait, the campaign's over? Right.
Okay.
So it's an interesting thing. I mean, when Kickstarter added the top header bit that you can change, oh, that's exciting. Then it made it easier because then people come after campaign's over and you can change that whenever you want. So when you come back in, 16 minutes, there'll be a new place that Marcin can edit and put in like a new image and hey, here's what's going on, just a little text.
Okay. I'm gonna do it
somebody
now.
asked, there's a couple questions. Okay, yeah, I think it's fine. No one's gonna get confused. There are a couple questions outstanding. I want to answer one of them, which is Bruce Triggs asked, did you get to, and I'll come back, Ezra, I'll get your question too. Bruce asked, did you get to see or type on a Hanson writing ball in person? And I want to tell you, as editor of this book, what was exciting is I was in Berlin at the Deutsche Technik Museum, the German technology or technical museum, in November, and not a popular time on a weekday to visit a technology museum. There were some school groups around, and I was going there because I'd heard it had a great printing floor, and I go in and there's this great, amazingly tattooed, pierced gentleman with a not fully shaved head, and I was like, this is my man, because I worked with offset printers in the past, and I'm like, I recognize this kind of person from the printing world. And it turns out, yes, he's a printer, lithographer, historian, curator, and had a great conversation with him. So incredible printing stuff, very pedagogically terrific. But they had a wall of typewriters in there, and I'm walking around, he's showing me, and I'm like, that's the Hanson writing ball. They have one right there. I got to see it in person. I would never have recognized it before editing this book. So I didn't, it's behind glass. Marcin, have you ever been able to see, you've seen one, I know. Have you been able to type on one? Or are they too fragile and no one lets you get touch them?
I've seen them in the typewriter museum in Catalonia, in Figueres, and they actually had two, I think. One was the regular one, and one was, maybe Glenn, you know more about this, moon type. There's, I think it's maybe somebody in the chat actually knows about moon type. I think it's the alternative to Braille, maybe, or something like this. It was an assistive version of the, which looked really interesting. Unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to type on it because I think they're just very precious.
Moon type.
Yeah.
No, I've never heard moon type. No, I never heard of this.
Yeah, it's this. I think it's a very obscure alternative to Braille, if I remember correctly. But to people
That's
maybe.
Oh, I see. It's curved. It's more like a feeling language instead of dots. I mean, that's the thing is, I think who would have known when Louis Braille was developing his system, like what the best way to learn by feel would be. And so the moon type system is, the moon is like, as I'm looking at it, you have to trace the forms of letters instead of running your fingers. So it's like a 2D form instead of kind of a 1D line.
Yeah. So, I can, you know what? I can show those things. This is a little bit harder to do live, but yeah.
Well, while you're doing that, we'll take some more questions here, so we'll just keep things going. It's Ezra had asked about, can you talk a little about the printer you chose and what makes you excited about working with them? If you're setting something up, I can talk about it, or you can hop in, whatever you like. Oh, there's the so there's the
So this is the typing ball, which was whoever asked is probably maybe an expert in this, but
Bruce,
it was a very early alternative. So this was the most successful typewriter before the QWERTY typewriter. It was actually mass produced. There were even electric version. It had this really interesting form factor, right? Where I think you just like you can't see what you type, but this wasn't unusual. Other typewriters, you could also not see what you type back then. And through quirks of time, and I think just luck and whatever, we ended up with the QWERTY rather than this, which was, I think, like a very tangible alternative. And this version is the moon type version, which is very, I think you could feel the letters as you're typing. So maybe this was for people who couldn't. This is to allow people who couldn't see to type rather than people who couldn't see to read. That would be my interpretation.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense, though. Here, I'm going to send you a picture, Marcin, here of the one that's in Germany. It's presented in a really interesting way, so I'm just going to send it to you via chat. Maybe you can post it. I don't want to mess things up. The printer. I'll sidebar to the printer. Marcin and I spent like 2+ years trying to find a printer for the book, because it's a really exciting thing to try to get a book printed, especially a very large and complicated one that requires complicated binding, when there's a global pandemic going on, and supply chain problems, inflation, and war. So that all kind of contributed. And there's a shortage of capacity in North America because with China doing abrupt shutdowns and entire city lockdowns at times, and the increased cost. I know this is very exciting. The increased cost of transatlantic shipping containers, which were like 5 times higher than they'd ever been before. It just all became an enormous supply chain and production mess. So if we had wanted to print in China, and there are many issues with that, logistical, political, ethical, whatever. There's a whole ball of wax there. But if we'd said, all right, we're gonna go with China, I don't know what would have happened. And in the end, Marcin agreed to, it was a hard conversation, agreed to postpone the Kickstarter for a year. I remember we were talking about that because originally it was going to be 2022. I think you dodged a bullet in the sense that, I'm sorry, that's a bad metaphor. I think you missed out on what would have been a really big problem, which is I think trying to get the book printed in 2022 and outside the U.S. most likely at that time, given the bids and people we were talking to. I think it would have been a big problem. Yeah. So is this a Hansen ball or is this something else? Am I wrong?
It looks like it, but it seems like a different version. That's sort of Maybe it's part of it disconnected because the things in the back seem related.
Over a piece of paper.
Maybe it's like a large scale version of it. Yeah. That's kind of
it was very big. I was surprised.
The beauty of the beauty and curse of keyboards is I will never stop learning because there's always something. I wanted to show this quick photo, and I also want to answer partly the question. I hope people don't mind that this is very chaotic, but I just got this photo and I just found it like very, very interesting to me. I'm going to try to show it. So it is from 1959, and it's the caption. I'm going to maybe read it a little bit. It uses the language we don't use anymore, but it says electronic typewriter for handicapped persons. And basically the idea is that the person could shine a light on any of those letters and it would get intercepted by, I guess, sensors. And here on this electric IBM typewriter, they added solenoids on the top. So if your light hit the letter, the solenoid would press the key. So this is like still very early integration, right? But it's kind of beautiful because, the moment people, this is much harder to do with a manual typewriter, right? Because they're much more finicky and much more unreliable. Like, depending on how you touch it, it could do different things. Electric typewriters are more, by the way, this is not an electronic typewriter, this is an electric typewriter, so this is not labeled properly. But electric typewriters are much more, you can press the key with any force and it doesn't matter, right? Because the force is the electricity down the road. So this was the first time. I love this idea because this is 1959 and they were already trying to make assistive keyboards, right? As the Moon type is like another example. I guess this is a theme we're encountering, but I've never heard of this before. And this was just an eBay search for a typewriter photo, which I've had for many years. And once in a while, there's still something new I learn.
What's funny is when I was at the Type Archive in 2017 in London, now it's unfortunately closed, they had this thing called monophoto. And so during the transition from hot metal typesetting to photo typesetting, there was a period in which typesetting companies stuck photos into their metal typesetting equipment, basically. So a linotype matrix, which usually was used to cast hot metal, they developed a version where they cut out the matrix part, the mold part, and stuck in a phototype letter. So you could still typeset all the experience that linotype operators had. You could still typeset phototype. It was a most bizarre thing, but it's that transitional technology. And you write a lot about, in the book, there are a lot of these awkward transitions where we go between one era of typewriting or early, like, oh, maybe it should be like this. It's like, well, no, that was a bad idea. But the later maturation of it is what was cool.
Yeah. I want to maybe, since we don't have an agenda, I want to show another one. I don't know if Glenn knows that I have this, so this will be a surprise for Glenn as well.
Hey, let me interrupt you 1 second. Well, we'll talk more about the printer in a bit, but there was another good question earlier. I just want to, and we'll come back. I mean, we got time. We're gonna in 5 minutes. We're gonna do a countdown. Ezra had also asked the biggest surprise you've had since launching the Kickstarter, which I thought was maybe a quick thing. You might want to answer, and then
oh my God!
What's the biggest surprise? I want to know that. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think honestly, the biggest one was how well it went. I mean, like, it sounds kind of cheesy to say, and maybe, but I think our best prediction, Glenn's and myself, and we spent months talking about this, and we have all these spreadsheets where we're trying to figure out what's going to happen and what's the best case scenario, what's the worst case scenario, and I think
it's like it was years, months days, hours, minutes, right? Because we talked about it generally for a really long time. Then more like the specificity was a spiral into more and more time
Yeah.
until we got to it.
But basically, like my personal best case scenario was we're gonna reach the goal sometime during the first live stream, and we reach it like 15 minutes before. So I think there was sort of like, it's funny because in hindsight it feels kind of like, oh, it's easy to forget, but I didn't know if that's gonna succeed. There was like a version of this campaign in my head where it doesn't meet $150,000, which I know sounds funny saying like this, which is because I'm looking at 752, but you never know. And so there was like an incredibly pleasant surprise, and I was really grateful for the support of everybody who decided to press those buttons so quickly, I guess, and support this.
We're down to 3 minutes. I'm going to keep my eye. Oh, we're having last pledges here, but and I mean, I think I can reveal the secret because you've already posted it, that there will be some number of copies afterwards. We could circle around to the printer very quickly. There's 2 minutes to go. I'm keeping my eye so we can actually do like a popping the ball. The printer, at some point we're like, well, what if we're super successful? When you're doing a Kickstarter, you should plan for failure. What if it doesn't fund? You should plan for the bottom level. What if we fund a dollar more than the goal? And you should also plan for success. And so at some point it's like, what if we need, if this is a $5 million campaign, can our printer print that many? And I asked them, and we got a kind of hard limit. And so without revealing secrets, like the campaign is going to require a significant percentage of the maximum number they can print. Mark has to decide his final count of the printing count, like how many books he wants to get printed, but we are relatively close to that. So after the campaign's over and we kind of evaluate everything and pre-orders go up, there will be some number of pre-order copies, but it won't be like 4,000 more. So that was actually a thing too, is what if we'd been really too successful, we would have had to go into another printing. So this is kind of a really sweet spot.
Look at this, the counting seconds now.
Yeah, I know.
I've never seen this before.
Kickstarter years ago put in someone just canceled the pledge. It's very disheartening when you're watching people go, oh no, I've got last minute regret, but it's fine, still over 750. And then it's back up. It's people coming at the last minute. Let's see. So, but the printer, maybe we could circle back there for just a second too, and then we'll show that image you wanted to show, which was the question was kind of like, so when we figured this out, part of it was like, how much can you charge for the book that's reasonable? It doesn't make you feel as a creator uncomfortable, and how do we match it? We eventually found a kind of a fine arts printer. They do job and like local work as well, but they do some very nice books. We own books that they've printed. I just got a book that was printed there by our friend Bruce Kennett last year, and so we're like, oh, well, maybe we should go with this domestic printer on this domestic paper because it simplifies things. And they gave us a price that worked. We're down to 49 seconds. I don't know. Should we start?
Why is it red?
It's red. There should be a klaxon going, wah, wah, wah.
As a designer, red means something's going wrong. No, I'm just joking.
I know.
This is very exciting.
My captain, it was great serving with you. We're going down with the, I don't know.
Oh my God.
Green and flashing. My favorite thing is that when you use Stripe, when you have a successful charge, it says, congratulations. And I'm like, you don't need to congratulate me. That's routine business. But okay, so here we go.
I actually don't know what happens after 70 seconds. I've never seen this page before.
I don't know. Here we go. We'll count down the last. There's a tape delay on YouTube, but we're now at 10 seconds.
9, 8,
$753,291. Maybe the final number 5,
4, 3.
We're a little less than 2, 1, and there we go. My wife just texted
me
$750,000. Woohoo! Oh, you get confetti.
That's an
nice.
animation. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. That's great.
Okay.
Woo! All right. Congratulations. Wow. Now we're done. And no.
Yeah. Well,
the hard part.
Wow.
Yeah, and seeing that it immediately switches to this thing at the top.
Yeah. Oh my God, this is fun.
Wild.
So it's 500%. How do you even process this?
It's so pleasing that it's 500%, not 466%, isn't it?
Yeah. So. Okay.
This is emotionally hard. We've talked about this. You asked me before the campaign started what it was going to be like, and I warned you. I don't remember if you asked about the emotional part, but I'm like, it's an emotional thing because you're putting so much of yourself on the line. And you're saying, how much do you like me, my work, what I've spent the last 7 years
Yeah.
doing? And so there is a particularly nice thing when, well, the answer is we like you 500%. That's how much.
Is this a Avengers reference? The
No, no.
yeah, no, no. This
Oh, that's cute. No.
this is great. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, my personal thing, I don't know how to celebrate, so that's my personal challenge. But I think what Glenn said is, and I'm immediately just like, okay, what's next, right? Because there's still a lot of work to do. Although hopefully none of this work is gonna be surprising because we've planned for this. We had the test prints. We know the printer. It's written. There's unknown unknowns, obviously, but I feel pretty confident that we sort of know what happens now until October. But yeah, I wanted to say this is like, I think Glenn captured this. This is a strange book. I just got an email. Yeah, I don't know what the email is. Tim, thanks. By the way, I'm looking at the chat too.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I guess I know that email because I got it on other campaigns. But it is a strange book, right? It is in many ways a book. Early on when I was working on this and I was pitching it originally to publishers, and then even maybe to Glenn, it was the common questions like, what are other books like this one? And I have a list, I have a page that I'm happy to share, which is, here are all of these other books, but none of them is exactly like this. None of them is this strange, like 1200 2-volume, super nerdy, but kind of like hopefully not too nerdy, right? And so this is nice because it's a validation of this quirkiness and strangeness and that this kind of thing can exist. This kind of thing that I imagine, and in a really large part, it is. This is a strange word to use, but it's uncompromised, right? Obviously, like we had a lot of discussion about paper, and there's a lot of like limitations on what you can do with weight and dimensions, and the size is slightly different than originally. Sure, there were a lot of kind of adjustment and things to actually make it real and make it printable and not make it cost too much. But in a way, it's also kind of like auteurs, quote unquote. Like it's this idea that I had that I wanted to see, and a lot of it will be there, I think, in October, and I think that's incredibly meaningful to me. And just wanted to thank everybody and Glenn for Ezra had this really great comment, because there was actually a friend of mine, Jake, who's not here, I don't imagine, who I was discussing with him many, I think Glenn, before you and I actually met, I was discussing with him, should it be self-published or should it be published traditionally? And he told me something that I think Ezra just said also. He was just like, I would just love Martin's version of this book. I would just want to see what would be like your strange idea. And I think, and that's what's happening. So that's really nice. It's really great. Yeah.
Well, yeah, nobody, it's funny. I said to somebody who's got a lot of experience in publishing, I said, no publisher will publish this book because it's too idiosyncratic. And I mean that in the best way, having read it multiple times now and been so intimately involved in understanding its stories and learning so much from it. But, and this person said to me, oh, no, you're totally wrong. And pointed out a bunch of really cool, interesting books. But I was like, yeah, but like from a commercial standpoint, somebody wouldn't take the risk on someone's first book. But all these people individually are willing to do it. And the economics of it are, there's Rizzoli Books and Taschen and some other publishers that publish big tomes, but I got to say they have to find the right price point for it. And I was the devil in your ear from the very beginning, where I was like, there should be a Kickstarter, because I thought no one will let you realize. I think that's Jake is exactly right. Ezra's right. It's like no one would let you realize the exact vision you had and wanted. And I think when someone is an auteur, whether it's a writer or filmmaker or whatever, I mean, this is an indie movie, and you've got an indie movie budget on it now too, honestly.
Yeah, and I'm laughing saying the word auteur because it's so kind of pretentious in a way, and it comes with this implication of ego.
Artistic vision.
Yeah, but if you sort of decouple it from
uncompromising vision.
Yeah. Yeah,
Listen, we had a lot of discussions about how the first pages of the book would look. You're an auteur.
oh yeah, Glenn and I this was like the biggest disagreement we've had.
I'm a traditional book person. I'm like, the audience expects, and you're like, look, this is my book. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. This is your book. You can do whatever you want. What is, and it's true. That's actually the fun part, is that you can do
Yeah,
whatever you want. You're not insulting the audience. It's very funny.
yeah.
Uh,
Okay, do we
there
have
was.
more
Do you want to talk more
questions?
about the
Yeah.
printer? I know we're gonna get
Oh,
off here soon, but there was
yeah,
people had some more questions. I know a lot of congratulations. Thank you
yeah.
for that. Kim, I think if we missed a question, ask it again, and we'll come back. Kim asked, just how do we come down to that? Like, how do you get down to that specific choice, right? And I mean, that's a long. I feel like
Yeah,
we wound up not having many choices, right? We got a lot of bids, and in the end, it was sort of a comfort level thing too. Is like, did we want to print? If we wanted to
yeah,
print inside the United States for like customs and shipping and we're going to go on
yeah.
press for a press check. All those
But
things
yeah,
became much more complicated.
but it was also like, it's an interesting question because I learned a lot in this process because I've never done anything physical, right? I wrote some things before, I designed some things before, probably a lot of things, but there was this whole aspect of it, how do you get it out there? The fulfillment, the logistics, we're still talking a lot about this. There's a lot of stuff, but I think to some extent, so there's the pragmatic things, like I think Glenn knew a lot of printers, so that was very helpful because we could talk to them and we could sort of know what's out there. But I think at some point it was also like, as funny as it sounds, vibes. Like we met with them and I was I'm gonna tell you about this wild idea. It's like 1,000,000 pages and all of this stuff. And it's also, by the way, it's about keyboards. And we just like watched their reaction. And they were like, this sounds cool. And we're like, okay. And then we talked about, you know what? We care a lot about paper. And we had all of this discussion about like 118, 135, 148, which is like the grammature or like the weight of the paper. And they were like, they didn't run away. They were just like, okay, let's talk about this. We can tell you some of your ideas are not possible. So they were good partners. They didn't just say yes to everything because that's not what you want. But they were also just kind of like, yeah, we see what you're getting at here. We wanna support your idea and maybe point you in the right direction or but also like stretch ourselves in trying to figure out how to make it happen. And I think like with this printer, I've never felt like they were just like looking down at us or they were just kind of like, oh, this is some random passion project kind of thing. Yeah.
They've been excited. I'll tell you three funny things. Well, first, it's Penmore Lithographers in Maine, and it's a third generation family run company. The son of the founder is in charge, and his son is deeply involved in it. So, and Bruce Kennett, who did the wonderful W.A. Dwiggins book, and then the recent Athanalia book, that's a follow up. He's been working with them for decades, and he knows the family well. The father, the grandfather was his mentor. The current guy is his mentor. Like it's great to have that incredible relationship. So we know how they perform. I've known Bruce for 30 years, and Bruce has been working with these people for 40 years, and he just did a book with them. Second one thing I think is interesting is like when we talk about capabilities, and like printing is a really wild thing because when we're used to, I would say, is like in the digital world, you have to kind of invent a lot of stuff yourself, or you find libraries, you find projects. It's kind of this whole thing. But like when you go into the physical world, people make stuff all the time. Like, you're not involved in it, but like, it's easier, I would say, at some level, to have a book printed than to make an ebook that works correctly. So like we're talking about shipping, and I said I knew it was possible to get custom boxes made. It's a thing that happens all the time. So we go to the printer and say, hey, do you have a contractor that can make a custom shipping box? And they're like, yeah, there's 3 companies we work with. They got bids and whatever. So we're going to have custom double-walled boxes. They're going to look great. They're going to protect the book better. But it's just a thing you ask, and it's not like Martine didn't have to make a custom box making machine. Somebody else is making the templates and dies.
Yeah, the 2 things I wanted to call out that maybe just fun for people, especially people who don't exist in the print world. So one was another important thing is their printing process is incredibly high quality, and I think Glenn can probably talk about it at length. I think it's called stochastic screening, but the way I understand it, not being an expert, is basically like retina display for print. Like the pixels, quote unquote, are so much smaller and so much more precise that just, looking at the test prints, they just look sharp as hell. And it's just, and the like, that was also like important for us, right? There was and it lined up really, really well. But then the other thing that really surprised me was, I was worrying that, as Glenn mentioned, like I haven't done printing a lot. And so I was worried, like, at some point you have to do CMYK separation and you have to like create all of these things, and all sorts of things are going wrong at this point. That was my impression, right? Like you're gonna learn that half of your photos look bad, that you cannot print on black. Like, like we had in a test print, we had like a bunch of photos. I deliberately put it there, right? Like on dark backgrounds or even text on dark backgrounds.
Solid. Look at that. I just want to say, look at that ink coverage. Like being able to hold a black like that. I mean, it was feasible in the past, but it's wonderful living in the present. That is very difficult. It used to be very difficult, and you can read the knocked out white type on that. It's so exciting.
So I was worried about that because, I know this is like a new universe for me, and, how paper captures ink, there's all of these things that I never known. And then we started talking to them, how do we do a test print? And they were just like, just send us the RGB PDF, don't even worry about it. they like, you don't have to do anything. And I was like, wait, what? I had this tension where I was like, oh my God, there's gonna be this moment where everything goes to hell. And I spent like weeks separating every image I have to resave as CMYK or something, put the right profile, and they were like, no, just send us a PDF. It was like so anticlimactic, but in the best possible way, because the test print actually went, I'm hopefully not jinxing anything, test printing went really surprisingly well. There were some things that we caught. By the way, we just printed one chapter, so obviously there's still a lot more to learn, but there was like, they're so good. They're really good at this. And I think they're really good at understanding that not everybody else is good at this. And I think that's like good partnership. They were just like, yeah, we'll take over this part.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean our indexer is in the chat. Hello, Jan.
Oh, Jan. Yeah. Well,
yeah, Jan is excited to get her hands on 1,200 pages of a book so she can start weeks and weeks of work. I worked with Jan for almost 30 years. Not recently enough, unfortunately, because I haven't been doing books, but it takes a village to make a print book, and you don't have to be the chieftain of the village or the village. You just I just find it very comforting. It's not like there's no more hard work to come, but for Marcin particularly, and me in the sort of project manager role, this is the point in which you say, like, everything now, like when you write a book, you're inventing everything de novo. You're doing the research, you're writing, you're putting this structure together. Then when you get to the physical part, you're like, oh, there are experts. These people, all they do is print. I don't have to. I just hand it to them, and they produce something like that preview test print we did, and we're like, oh, they know what they're doing. This is great. And it's an exciting thing. Did we get all the questions? I think there might have been one other person.
By the way, hi to everybody. Can I just say, like, I don't know everybody in a stream, in a chat, so I'm sorry. But there's so many people that I know. I see Andy, I see Jason, I see Jan, I see Jeff, I see Ezra, who's a really good friend of mine. I see Dan and Kim, and so Doug is there. I'm just scrolling up. Thank you so much for being here. I just want to say, and for those people whom I don't know, thank you also. Maybe we'll get to know. I see Bruce earlier. Also, hi again to Glenn's dad, if he's still here. That's super cool. So I just want to say hi to everybody. It's really nice for you to like recognize your names and for everybody to be here on this super random, non-scheduled live stream.
let's see, there was a printing, well, I think the last part of the printing question is really like, there's an advantage. So at some point this summer, we're getting it scheduled. Marcin and I are going to go and spend 16-hour days walking back and forth to the press. So from a technical standpoint, this book is 1,216 pages in 2 volumes, then 160 pages as the extras volume, and then the 32-page booklet with a 4-page cover. That's the booklet reward add-on. So that adds up to, it's 38 signatures. A signature is 2 sides of a sheet printed, and each signature will be 32 pages, 16 pages printed on each side and then folded and bound. So 38 signatures for the main book. 5 signatures for the 3rd volume and 1 signature. So that's gets us to 44 signatures. Each signature takes about an hour or so to print, and they run 2 shifts a day. So that will be part of the summer, will be us walking over to a press, looking at stuff, pointing at things, press people pointing, a rep pointing, making changes, circling stuff, then going back and press, and then running thousands of that sheet and then doing the thing again. And so we'll be doing that for 6 to 8 days.
We're gonna smell really nice, I imagine, at the end of it.
We smell like so much. Yeah, the ink, that fresh soy ink smell will permeate us.
This
forever.
still smells. Please nobody record this, but
it's a
this
good
is
smell.
great.
Jeff had asked, this is always a great question.
Oh,
hey, do you have plans to create another book in the future? I hope so.
So this is really interesting, right? Like, probably. The main priority is, we need to print this, right? So I just definitely want to focus on that. Then there's also a question that we don't have an answer yet. I don't have an answer yet. Is there another edition of this book? Right? And we talked a lot about maybe something that's like smaller, or just 2 volumes, ebook. I don't actually know. Like I very deliberately didn't want to promise anything because I don't know how I'm gonna feel about this project come end of year, right? It maybe I'll be tired of keyboards for the rest of my life. Maybe I am tired right now. I don't know if you can tell. I'm exhausted. Kickstarter, it's its own project. Sorry.
It's also possible a paperback a publisher may come to Marcin and say, "Hey, we'd like to produce a paperback edition of this," and then Marcin does not have to go and press for another 2 weeks in 2024 or something like that. So that's, no one's asked yet, obviously, but we don't. That's
wait, somebody asked yesterday. We didn't talk about it, but okay. So
really? Oh wow!
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? But so this is still the main focus, right? So I want to say this because I just want this to. I want everybody. Apparently, 4,278 people. I want them to be happy about this.
Wow.
And yeah, I think I would love to write another book. I had a lot of ideas. Probably something. Well, not as intense. I'm actually interested in maybe going through the traditional publishing process and see what that's like, just to capture that experience and see, I exercise so much control over this book that maybe next time I could not, and I will be okay with it. It's hard to say as a designer, obviously, but I have some ideas about books on typography, and especially the sort of typography and engineering side. There's more sort of UI stuff, designy. So I think that would be fun, but nothing solid. I did definitely. What's the interesting question for me, and now maybe for Glenn and other people, is, and this is scary, and I'm gonna just confess this, because this was a big project, and my question is is every project that I do is gonna be like this just because of my nature? Because I love going deep on stuff and I love exhaustiveness. And again, I hope this book is not exhaustive in a bad sense, can't believe he just jumped for 10 pages to talk about some random little No, it's very, I think, carefully considered as a whole, and I hope it's just a lot. It covers a lot because there's a lot to cover, and I hope it's still fun. So we'll see. That's a question I have to resolve within myself. Is this did I just get it out of the way, the one big project, and I can focus on smaller ones, or not?
You can write shorter books. It is possible, and I think that's where you get to the monographs, right? It's there's something really focused on a single topic, and it's also, I think you now have this expansive knowledge of like printing and production, so you kind of have a sense of costs and overhead and the amount of time and effort it takes from you as a designer
Yeah.
and creator. I mean, it'd be weird if you wrote a book that was like, I don't know, like 40,000 words and it was mostly words and somebody else handled it for you. It would feel dramatically different, I imagine.
Yeah. By the way, I wanted to say something explicitly and also like invite people to share this with other people, which is if you followed my newsletter for a while, I'm really interested in, I understand that this is a very specific process we went through, Glenn and I, and a few other people, like Jan maybe, hopefully in the chat. Like, you know, it is a weird project and probably not very many other projects will exist like this. But if there's anything in this journey that you're interested in, like what was this part of the process? What was Kickstarter like? What were the lessons we learned? That I'm very happy to share this. Like like a lot of this project for me is how can I help other people to do this if this is in any way applicable, right? And like it's possible that like Glenn and I will share some of those spreadsheets with financial calculations. We haven't talked about it, so I'm not putting him on the spot to say that we will. But you know, I'm like maybe it is like secret knowledge, but for you know a lot of like the design process, I wanna like open quote unquote open source or like Creative Commons a lot of the photos. It's like very important for me to like to also help because I'm a designer. I know like those things can be hard, and if there's anything that's like helps people like do a project or any Kickstarter project or a book or whatever, please let me know because I have a lot to share. I just don't sometimes know how to share it and what's interesting.
I've got a book in progress that I started, I think, when we were in the first year of the printing bids, and at some point I just wrote more of it recently, and it's called something like, you know, the nitty gritty, the sort of not. It's like everything about Kickstarter that you don't want to think about. So it's like all the numbers, budgeting, fulfillment, all that kind of stuff, taxes. I mean, shipping overseas. So excuse me, it's all the things I've learned about everything but like, I mean, so the marketing, like building a campaign, marketing, whatever, there's a lot of people who can and help you with that. There's a lot of information. You can look at campaigns, people freely give you your time. The underpinning stuff I feel like is incredibly ugly and hard, especially when you get a bigger project. So at one point, you know, Marcin and I had to have a, you know, I don't know how many hours we talked about tax and shipping, because if you ship, it used to be much simpler to ship overseas, and then changes in the UK and EU. Like Marcin will probably have to get a UK VAT number, is the most likely thing, even though the UK doesn't charge anything for importing books. It should be a 0% import, but we've been told that people receiving the book in the UK may need to pay like an import fee because it costs more than $160. Like the endless details, and we've warned people in the campaign, like, hey, if you live outside the US, it's possible your country will ask you for 10 or 20%, maybe more, to receive the book, but we can't, as a small producer, we can't, you know, it's going to 90 countries, I think. We can't do that. And so I feel bad because it would be great if there was a streamlined process where we could collect the money in advance if it was owed and ship it and you just got it. But even in the United States, like every state has sales tax rules, and just going over that. So there's a lot of ugly stuff that's hard. Well, you know, one of the things that we came up with, though, that we realized, I think you and I both, is that because Kickstarter sets, when you set a reward, the minute campaign launches and someone places backs a reward level, it can't be changed. And you can add more reward levels and you can do some other tweaks. But it meant that in planning the budget for the book, everything had to assume kind of a worst case scenario. So we started at the smallest possible book, so the third volume wasn't included, and the smallest possible quantities to make it all work. Because and then as the campaign got bigger, it was possible for Marcin to make choices about improving the book for everybody, because we couldn't lower the price, and shipping is a little more expensive. So because of volume, we're going to get some advantages, but we can't lower the shipping price, and the book is now going to be like a pound plus heavier than it was at the start of the campaign. So it made more sense to like make the book better than to try to change the price. And maybe a future Kickstarter thing, they would let you have a slider so you can lower the price as it went on.
You can't pass the savings on to a customer, which is sort of interesting. But I thought Mark had a good question. Do you mind if I jump into that?
I'm sorry. Yeah, please.
Yeah, so Mark is asking, I guess everybody can see the chat, I imagine, but Mark is asking like, books are like physical and you can change them. And I think it's petrifying to me. Like, I mean, it's good in the sense that it's an object that's not gonna disappear, right? And I know some people will throw it away at some point. That's sort of, it's not gonna be like got a capital L legacy in a way. Maybe it will to some extent, but so that's nice. But it is scary, Mark, and particularly scary because, and I already thought about it, and we were talking about it, like. And I imagine everybody who does things encounters this. The moment people get it in their hands, I will learn something new that I wish I knew while typing. And hopefully it's just gonna be something like nice, but I might also learn that I made mistakes. I might also learn that I didn't understand something correctly, or I didn't get to this source that I should have gotten. In hindsight, it would be very obvious and painful, but it's not right now. So it's an interesting challenge, and I'm dreading it to some extent. But of course, when we got this test print that we kind of put together as this booklet, it just feels nice. It was like a very, there were many small and big milestones in this whole process, but this one was like, oh, this is what it's about. You can hold it and take it with you and read it and live through it and look at it closely. And after so many years, I kind of forgot, and it was really nice. So I'm also just really looking forward for people to feel this object, and specifically because I design it so that it feels a certain way, and I hope it's the right way.
The test print is an interesting thing too. Is I don't think that was affordable at some point in the past, and with digital, I mean, presses are very analog, right? But they're super digital now. And my background in the printing industry goes to the late '80s. Well, actually, even the mid '80s. I worked on my high school and college newspapers, and we obviously had to work with printing plants to get those printed. And just watching, I mean, you think about how everything's become so digital in so many ways. You're like, well, printing is still a very analog thing, but it's not at many levels. Like there's the analog act, but so much of it is digitally controlled now, and it's reduced costs. So when you make plates, like the plates are literally, you have a file, it gets output to metal that goes right on the press, and then the press has all these digital controls and feedback to ensure colors are consistent, ink flows, all this stuff. So what comes out is like a digital analog hybrid that's a physical object. And so a few years ago, some comics artists I know who had books kept talking about wet prints, wet proofs. And I was like, what are these? Like, well, you go on press and they print you something from the press. I was like, that's affordable. They're like, oh yeah, we got to do it for color and whatever. So this is not a terribly high expense. And in fact, it was so low. That's why Marci made the choice to order some copies to use as previews that we could send out to sort of show people in advance. And we have 1/38 of the book in that form in some level. Like the book will be 38 times larger than the preview, but it's exactly the press, the material, the paper, the separation, the profiles, everything. And so it gave, it was probably, I mean, I've gone through this, but not for a while, not in this way. Yeah. It was so great to see it in hand. You've never gone through this, and it just felt like it was so worth the money to do it, and it wasn't a lot relative to the overall cost of the book.
What was really interesting to me, this is gonna sound super nerdy, but I don't know how many people know that like early albums, like vinyl or even shellac, they were called albums because you only had like one song per record or two songs per record, and they were like photo albums. They were like albums of a few records. That's where the name comes from, because the technology wasn't quite there yet, and eventually they found a way to compress it into one record or two sides. But seeing this like one chapter of a book just printed, I was like, what if books were just like collections of chapters? Yeah. You could take one out, and I don't know, there's something really interesting in this idea. And
you joked about like we could do a subscription, like the Shift Happens of the Month Club, and every month you get one of these signatures, you get one chapter, and after 38 months you get a binder. Jeff Morris asked, will the now larger third volume still fit in the main 2-volume bookcase? And the answer is yeah. We had estimates all along. The slipcase, by the way, is an intensely manual object, so the cost of those doesn't go that much down with quantity, because those are being assembled. They'll be cut out by machine, by templates, and then human beings with their actual hands will be hand assembling every slipcase in its final form. So there's just a ton of labor involved, but boy, it's going to be so volumes 1 2 and 3 will all fit neatly into it. And if you order the this sounds like marketing, it's not because it's over. If you order the add-on booklet and you order the book, the printer is going to ship it as a separately wrapped thing, sort of shrink wrapped in with the slipcase will be shrink wrapped. The booklet will also be plastic wrapped and connected, so you won't. But when you receive it and unpack it, that will also fit into the slipcase because it's so thin. So you'll be able to put, if you have the booklet, the 3 volumes and the booklet in the slipcase as well. But we decided not to have them manually insert it in the process of assembling the slipcase because we want all the slipcases to be identical. Every set that's printed, they will put in the slipcase, shrink wrap, and then put in a box. And so all the copies that are sold after the campaign ones go out will all be pre-boxed by the printers in our double-walled box so that the fulfillment house is never touching the books, just so there's less damage and opportunity for things to go wrong. So that added more cost and confusion. But I mean, ultimately, I think it's cheaper because it means there are less people involved in handling it. But it means that it's kind of the printer is getting everything into boxes, no matter whether they're shipping it or it's being shipped later.
Yeah, and yeah,
that's probably too much printing detail, but I don't know.
Yeah, the funny thing I wanted to mention, like somebody asked about like the surprises of Kickstarter. I think maybe that was Ezra, but
what was your biggest surprise? Yeah,
but the big surprise for me was like how much printing technology is still evolving. Like like I mentioned this earlier about this RGB stuff, and Glenn just hinted at this other thing. Like, it's not that like we forgot about. We moved from print to computers. It's like, no, they're still like they're both evolving independently, and like the stochastic screening. I don't actually know how old it is, but this was a discovery for me that this sort of like retina display of printing actually exists, and it's not like unaffordable. So it's really fun to realize that that there's like some people still working on making it better. And like I knew about print on demand, which is like another aspect of like, I just like the idea of like more people making books just out of principle. So like whatever goes into making it possible, whether it's like a little POD, a small thing, or this intense project that we are putting together, I think anything that makes it easier, I think it's just makes me very happy.
I should also say, like, this is one of the advantages of the modern era, as well as it used to be that, you probably have to print 1,500 to 2,000 books of almost any size to make it worthwhile. And you can go offset for 500 copies now. I mean, there's digital printing methods. There's an outfit in the Midwest Colorado called Bookmobile that I used for a book a few years ago called London Kerning, which is a joke on London Calling, about London type design and type archives and things in London. And I knew it wasn't going to have a big run. It was a very little weird monographic kind of thing. It was just a peculiar little 70-something page volume. I wound up having it digitally printed, and I was very pleased with the results because it was a tiny book, and it was, I funded it via a Kickstarter. But I was right on the edge. I had actually in the end, I think I had 600 copies printed. And if I'd planned it out, if I knew I wound up going back for another run because it was print on demand. So I could get 300 extra done after the first 300, but I could have gone offset if I'd known I was going to have 600 initially and probably gotten slightly better results. But when I started out, I don't know. I mean, a lot of publishers see this too, is their printing costs. It's not so much they've gone down as that they can print fewer copies more affordably, even if the per unit cost is as much. Yeah. But it's exciting. Can I tell this one? The one funny anecdote I forgot earlier is the printer, or the head estimator at the printer at Penmore, was very excited about this project and said, so how does this work? So do you pay these people back when you start shipping the book? And I said, oh, this isn't like that. Like, I didn't realize that they didn't know. It's because they're printers. They're not involved in doing Kickstarters. They're not like a full service house. And I said, no, these are like sort of like pre-orders. They're giving us trust. And he was like, oh my God, like it was revelatory. And so I've offered him, we'll be doing like kind of a briefing for the printer about Kickstarter, because I think they should advertise themselves more out there in the world to people like us who are looking for a printer who could be kind of their back end and do all the hand holding and estimating, because I think they've done a really nice job with the hand holding.
And of course, like, I think people, I don't know if Andy's still here, but Andy Bio, but Kickstarter is also changing. like people's expectations. There's all of this sort of ecosystem of things surrounding Kickstarter, which sometimes means I've got so much spam from people like, use us for this thing, use us. Like, 90% spam, but I think we follow up with some people. But also, there's this like other, backer kit and like other things that come, so it's really interesting. Sometimes hard because, you can get advice from somebody who hasn't been in the Kickstarter universe for a while, and that advice might be obsolete, but you don't know. But it is kind of it's also interesting, and that's what I mean when I said earlier, like Kickstarter is like almost its own project on top of whatever project you're putting on Kickstarter.
Oh my gosh.
Like we've seen some. I don't know how it registered to people who are in the chat, but we talked about marketing a lot, like. Podcasts, should I put out this typewriter simulator at this moment in time? Some of it was just a little like inspiration striking, but some of it was just like more deliberate than I typically do things, right? Just thinking about like what needs
I
to.
think one of the key things. One of the key things that I think is a good thing, a lesson to put on, and Martina and I have talked about doing a live cast about lessons learned at some point when Martina's recovered from this whole experience. Maybe we'll do a Kickstarter lessons learned thing. But it was you did a great thing that we didn't totally plan, which is you launched the website about a month before the Kickstarter. I knew we were going to launch it earlier, and you were ready, and you're like, all right, let's bring it up. That got so much attention. People were so excited by what you had to share on that website at a level I was flummoxed by, but I think I shouldn't have been, because I thought there would be interest in in a big book about keyboards, but people's interest, like it was getting coverage as a website almost, which is unheard of. So I thought we'd have to do a lot of marketing and work to kind of find people and to get the message out towards the Kickstarter. And the Kickstarter would launch, and we'd spend weeks trying to make sure everyone heard about it. And instead, you launched the website, and tons of people came and signed up for the announcement email. People signed up for your newsletter. And so when we launched, you were able to reach a large audience, many of whom you just gathered, and they immediately came on and they got that early bird price. I did not expect that part to go like that easily. I thought that would be hard fought and then we'd still do great, but instead that was at some level the easiest way to get people. I did not expect that.
Yeah, I actually wanted to tie what you just said, Glenn. We probably should finish soon, right? I guess. I don't know.
My God.
We don't have
Thank
a plan.
Everybody just keeps watching.
I think my signal is like when the viewer count starts dropping, and it hasn't yet, which I really appreciate.
We're dizzy. We're a little dizzy. I think that's the thing, is at times Archie and I have had conversations where I think both of us are slightly hallucinating because it's just too much,
Yeah, but I wanted to share with people, and this is related to, I forgot, I think Jeff was asking about the slipcase. And so the funny thing is that the third volume is gonna make the slipcase actually better. And I will show you how. And this is like, speaking of the website, this is something I just haven't finished. I actually made this like 3D. So it was actually important for me for this slipcase to be meaningful, because that's kind of how I do things. And maybe too often sometimes. And so I actually like collected all of the shift keys from different eras. And they're from typewriters, from electric typewriters, electronic typewriters, old computers, new keyboards. This tells the story too. And I'm working on a site where you can like celebrate all of these shift keys, which I just ran out of time because doing 3D stuff is apparently very hard. But there's all of these shift keys that I photograph, and I'm making this interactive. But what I'm trying to say, it actually allows like a nicer spine. The third volume pushes it a little bit so that it actually feels nicer, and it's like nice symmetry, this sort of comb. So in a way, this is a stretch goal that we didn't announce, is that the back of the slipcase looks better, which I don't know how many people care, but I care, because look, this comes from a ZX Spectrum, this comes from the Bloomberg Terminal, this is an old typewriter, this is Shift Freedom. Anyway, I send the website at some point.
I love the 3D rollover effect. It's great.
Yeah, this was, I made this like 3D renderer earlier. This was partly just to get people excited, partly to visualize this for the printer, partly to put it in a Kickstarter video. But then I thought, like, what if this was a game? So I'm making a game out of it, which is find the shift. Is this Selectric 3? Is it Selectric 2? Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like everything, everything is detail. At some point, Martine said, "Can we have thumb cuts?" And I don't even know if you and I didn't remember what the word was. And we asked the printer, like, "Can we do that?" And they're like, "Sure." And so they come up with a very granular bid that's like, "Well, that's going to add, 15 or 18 cents a copy at this quantity." And we're like, you made the call. Yeah, let's do it if it fits in the budget, we'll do it. But it's like it's just every physical detail becomes a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. And yeah, as a designer, I like appreciate it because it's a little bit like what is functional and what is aesthetic, right? Like the some of the decisions we made is just the book looks nice. It's very important. Like you put it on a bookshelf, if it like glimmers in the sun a little bit when you like, that's cool. But also like, yeah, you want this book to be like, you want to grab it, you want to take it to a book, like maybe to a coffee shop, maybe on a plane, maybe just even reading it should not be like a drudgery of like, oh, this is too heavy. So there's just like a lot of really interesting considerations.
Well, think about the conversation about the paperweight conversation was about that. Is Marcin had a weight goal per volume, and some of the papers we looked at were just too heavy. The book would be like 5.5 pounds. I mean, in the end, it's that we went with what is 118 GSM 80-pound stock that's pretty opaque. It holds out the ink well. We're happy with it, but it's still if Marcin, there was this magical 135 GSM 90-pound paper stock that we really wanted. It does not exist. There's some in Europe. At one point, we discussed having essentially, I don't know, many tons of paper shipped from Gmünd, Germany to Maine to get the right paper. And then I think we came to our senses about the complexity of managing that and the cost. But shall we call it a morning? You've done pretty well this morning, it feels like.
I have a job to go to. That's the funny thing. I actually have a full-time job that in part this is probably why the book took a little bit longer than I wanted, but anyhow, I think do we have closing words of wisdom? I'm really thankful for definitely everybody who just supported this. I think a lot of people here probably tweeted about it or posted about, I don't want to say tweet, it's a strange word, posted about it or told their friends, and I probably don't even know about most of it, so I really appreciate you spreading the word and backing and being supportive. Like so many people that I recognize just like kept me going for many years just by saying like a little nice thing once in a while, or even recognize like this is hard. So thank you for that, and I think the book is gonna be, I'm really excited about it. I think it's just gonna be fun, and I hope you all like it, but I think you will. This is a cocky thing to say, I don't know, but like I hope it's fun. I don't know. It's a good book. I think it's a good book.
Impartial third party. It's a lot of fun. It's going to be the Tom Hanks question has come up, but it's going to be a great book. And Marcin, thank you for bringing me along on this journey. I learned a lot, and I'm excited. It's such a funny thing when the outcome is something digital. It's really hard to know when you're done. When the outcome is something physical, you got to hold it. So it can be anticlimactic when you ship a project online, and less so when somebody. I was just watching. My friend Anthony Johnston writes a lot of sci-fi, like hard edge sci-fi, and was the screenwriter, or sorry, he wrote the graphic novel in which the screenplay for Atomic Blonde was based, and he's got his first cozy mystery out, and just watching him get a box of books from the publisher and carefully open it and pulling out a book, and I was like, oh yeah, that's that experience. It's a palpable thing, and the thing that's in your hands, that thousands of other people are also going to hold that, an identical sort of fungible object in their hand, fungible, tangible material. It's very exciting.
Yeah. Cool. Well, yeah. Let's meet again in October, maybe, or sometime earlier. Maybe we do live stream from a printer. I don't know. That could be fun, right?
It could be fun. I think people. I mean, I go on YouTube and watch videos about making boxes and printing, so there might be some interest in it. But thank you to everybody for joining us for this exciting conclusion. Tune in at shifthappens.site for more adventures, the continuing adventures.
I just added new things to the site. Shifthappens.site/
store is where we've got a placeholder there now. You can sign up if you haven't to get an announcement of when the pre-orders start. We're still working through details because there's no rush at this point. But people are interested, and we'll get
if somebody wants
soon.
Yeah, if you hear of somebody who still wants to buy a book, there's gonna be, as we talked about, I think somebody asked about a specific number. We don't know what the specific number is. It's not gonna be a lot. So, if you hear about somebody who still wants it, there's gonna be a way to buy it still, but it's not gonna be, it's not gonna be very long, we don't think. So that's what the store is for.
I don't think so. I mean, we've done most of the copies that can be printed are already pre-sold in the campaign. But yeah, go to shifthappens.site/store and just sign up, and then or tell someone to sign up there, and then they'll get one single email when pre-orders start.
Yeah. Otherwise, you know where to find us.
Right.
So I hope Twitter, Mastodon,
find me on
email,
Mastodon,
website. Yeah.
Toot, toot.
Yeah, actually, maybe not Twitter anymore. I think that ship's sailing. Okay. That's not the way I want to end this. Oh my God, why are I talking about Twitter?
Right.
Thank you, everybody.
Congratulations, 500% funded.
Oh my God, it's amazing. Yes, thank you, everybody. See you later. Bye.
I'll put my hand in front of. Bye.
Bye. Bye. All right.